Good evening. And as we observe Yom Kippur together, sometimes I'm deeply reminded of the fact that we just don't know a lot. We're only human beings. And our forebears who came before us knew that as well when they shared this prayer that we read in a traditional setting on Yom Kippur Eve. The need of your peoples are numerous, O God, and their knowledge is scant. They are unable to express their needs and desires. We beseech you to consider our thoughts even before we call out. And I think as we come together and as we think, how can we be our best selves? What lessons do we need to learn so that we can achieve a better relationship with ourselves, a better relationship with others, and a better relationship with God? We need to learn those very lessons. And so I decided to look around and I found a lesson in an unlikely place. The teacher is Kenneth Feinberg. Well, who's Kenneth Feinberg, you might be wondering? He was the man who was in charge of the funds following the 9/11 attacks to distribute to families for compensation when they either lost their loved one or were victims and physically injured or spiritually or emotionally injured, I think, as a result of this September 11th attacks. And he engaged in this process by speaking to families, by learning what happened to them. And through this very process, he came up with several life lessons. And I think that you will hopefully find those life lessons interesting this evening. And I hope that perhaps you will carry them on in your own lives. And while he shared in a book about what it was like to run that fund, he shared only briefly what it was like when he began a deep effort of self-reflection and how hard it was. But here's what he learned and how his life changed as a result. The first thing he understood was that his career needed to change. He could no longer run a big fancy law firm, and engaging in work between two Fortune 500 companies was just not where it was at for him anymore. In fact, he downsized his career, began teaching more frequently in university settings to train the next generation of lawyers and scholars to engage in ethical work, compensation work, and ultimately conflict resolution work. He also started choosing cases in order to transform, not just in a positive way, the litigants, but also society as a whole. And two examples of that would be the cases that he took in response to the Archdiocese of the Roman Catholic Church in Cincinnati with accusations of social abuse, and he fought on behalf of Hispanic police officers in New York City in a class action suit for racial discrimination. In both instances, it was his goal to make the world a better place. And we learned the same lesson in Pirkei Avot, that the work sometimes is overwhelming and we may want to run away from it. But if we're going to be a positive member of society, if we're going to make a difference, even if it's just a drop in the bucket, then we show up, we work hard, we follow Rabbi Tarfun's advice, and we do not decease from our great effort. Another thing that he talks about is that some things happen just by sheer luck. We don't know why it is that somebody was held up at Dunkin' Donuts, and because they were held up at Dunkin' Donuts, they never made it into the office and were saved from the World Trade Center. Yet somebody else decided that very morning, they rolled out of bed, they woke up early, they were going to catch the early bird worm, and they didn't survive. He also talks about how sometimes even within the same ladder or fire group, there would be somebody who went in and tried to rescue and never made it out, and somebody else who was just fine. And there doesn't seem, according to him and his estimation of meeting with all of these victims and all of these families, whether they were families of individuals who were there and earning millions and millions of dollars managing funds, or simply undocumented workers working in restaurants, when he looked into their eyes and he spoke to them, he could find no reason or understanding why somebody lived and somebody died. And he came to believe that whatever cosmic force was making its call, he says, quote, "It's clear to me that life and death can turn on the most innocuous events. It's just sheer luck. The random nature of who lives and who dies was the common thread he found amongst all of those families. And as a result, he doesn't plan very far in advance. In fact, he makes it a point to recognize and understand the fragility of life, that it is unpredictable, it is fickle, and that it doesn't make sense sometimes." And I want to share with you another story from our tradition. This is a Hasidic story about Satan talking with some other angels about how Satan can remove hope from humanity. And the conversation goes as such. Satan, also known as the accuser, just FYI, says, "Tell the people that there is no God." And another angel says, "Oh, that might work. Maybe they'll just lose hope." Somebody else says, "Maybe if we tell them there's no judgment for sin and they need not worry about what's going to happen, maybe that'll do it." And a third angel comes along and says, "No, you should tell them their sins are so great they'll never, ever, ever be forgiven." Satan says, "No, none of those things will matter to them. I think we should simply just tell them there's plenty of time, that they can go ahead and be distracted to pursue whatever it is that they think. They can go ahead and strive and struggle forward, thinking that if they take this promotion and this move in a few years, they'll reach the goals that they want." And what he ultimately comes down to and understands is that you cannot plan. You don't know what will happen tomorrow. So you need to live in the now. Make the now count. Make the now matter. Be sure that you're in those right relationships with your friends and your family, with yourself, with God. Make it matter. It does. Life is short. The third lesson he offers is one of compassion. Compassion for self, compassion for others. And that it became abundantly clear to him the more people he spoke with, the more families he interacted with, how imperative it was for him to understand who they were and have compassion for them. And by doing so, he increased his own level of compassion for himself. And of this, he says, quote, that he has become a better listener, that he no longer offers gratuitous advice without thinking through the consequences. He tries to give more careful answers, and he tries to understand the viewpoints of others, and he is more accepting of human flaws and foibles. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could all live in such a way that we ask questions about why? Why is somebody struggling? And what does it mean? How can we be supportive? Instead, oftentimes we find ourselves judging others, and at times even being the harshest judge of all to ourselves. When we look into our sacred text, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, specifically, we find this message screaming out to us. This text reminds us there's nothing permanent in life. What is worthwhile is sharing the pleasure and the joy that we have with the people whom we love. This Yom Kippur, may you be open to living in the now, having compassion for yourself, really being giving of who you are so that you can continuously live to be your highest self.